I was born in 1997 and grew up watching some amazing cartoons. I have many happy childhood memories of watching various shows. Some of my favorites included Totally Spies, Shaolin Showdown, and SpongeBob SquarePants. The feminist idea of girl power was in full swing by the time I was born. This was depicted in many children's cartoons, such as Kim Possible, the Powerpuff Girls, and Witch. I loved these shows. However, there was a larger social disconnect between what these shows portrayed and my own experience of being a girl. The girls in these shows are close friends, and the friendships are portrayed as positive, unifying, and stable. My own experiences of female friendship growing up was largely toxic and dysfunctional. In primary school, I was heavily bullied for 7 years by the girls I hung out with. As an adult, I have had many stable female friendships, but also some turbulent ones. I often wondered why shows like Shaolin Showdown only had one female character. I think the reason for this is simple. Females actually are not all best friends. Women tend to gossip, be catty, and hostile to one another due to female intrasexual competition. Women see each other as competition, and relational bullying is a common female experience. Feminists never talk about this. We never hear feminists acknowledge bad female behavior or women behaving badly. If they do, they are somehow still victims. My name is Zarina Matcha, and you're watching The Rational Female. If you enjoy my content, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. In this video, I'm going to discuss a few clear examples of feminism in children's cartoons and how this was a form of casual misandry that indoctrinated young boys and girls into adopting feminist ideology. Let's start with Johnny Bravo. I vaguely remember this show. It is about a brash, self-absorbed man who lives with his mother and is constantly hitting on women. The joke is that he is an idiot and the women around him are much smarter. This lends itself to the dumb man, smart woman trope, which one episode really hammers home. Witch A Woman is a season 4 episode where Johnny goes to a fortune teller and she decides to put a curse on him by turning him into a woman so he can learn a lesson. When he wakes up the next day, he is indeed a woman. He tries grooming himself and finds it exhausting. He decides to dress up in his mother's clothes and is laughed at by the people around him. What struck me is how, as a female, he wants to be checked out and admired for his looks. He doesn't like being the ugly chick that people just laugh at. He sees other, more attractive, well-dressed women, and he wants to look like them. We see a shop assistant pull Johnny, or Jenny as he calls himself, into a shop and dress him up in a nice outfit. Johnny now becomes beautiful and struts around in a cut-off top, tight jeans, and heels. There was this funny scene of him remarking on how if you're gorgeous, you can get anything you want, and this annoys a lot of unattractive older women. For me, this was actually a good metaphor for feminism in general. As it happens, now that he looks good, he is receiving a lot of attention from males. He got what he wanted, right? Men keep hitting on Johnny, but instead of enjoying the attention, he gets furious and throws his arms up in despair. Then, a woman snaps her fingers and sings a song starting with the line, "You think that men are pigs, I say we all know that's a fact." Couldn't be more on the nose. The song is called Girls Are Smart and shows a lot of young women physically attacking men who give them compliments or holler at them on the street. Now, this is interesting. A lot of women actually do want attention from men. A moment ago, Johnny wanted to be noticed for his appearance. A lot of women do enjoy being checked out and receiving compliments. Why else do women post pictures on the internet? There's actually a good American Dad episode called Rubberneckers, which subverts this and shows how at the end, the women enjoy being looked at if they are dressed nicely, and everyone sings a song about it. I love this, and it goes to show how clever and non-woke Seth MacFarlane is. I'm not saying that men can't be annoying, and there are times when receiving unwanted attention is a pain. But I think it's more empowering for women who don't want that kind of attention to learn to ignore it and just get on with life rather than react strongly. I also think that it depends on how a woman is dressed or how she behaves. If a woman is dressed in a way that clearly signals Look at me, she is going to get attention. Humans notice each other all the time. It's normal. At the end of this episode, Johnny realizes that girls are smart and then just turns back into a stupid man. Episode over. It's incredibly misandrist. Next up is the Powerpuff Girls. Another misandrist TV show cartoon episode is the season 3 episode Equal Fights. Fun fact, the person who wrote the Johnny Bravo episode I just discussed is called Amy Rogers. I looked up this Powerpuff Girls episode and she actually co-wrote this episode as well, and for a few years she was the head writer of the Powerpuff Girls. Pretty interesting. In the episode Equal Fights, we are introduced to a female supervillain named Femme Fatale. She robs a bank and wants all the money to be replaced with pictures of Susan B. Anthony, a prominent feminist figure. Femme Fatale manipulates the Powerpuff Girls by telling them how undervalued they are because they are girls, and that female superheroes are not as revered as male superheroes. The Powerpuff Girls try and think of female superheroes, and they could only think of Wonder Woman. Of course, this isn't true. There are loads of female superheroes. Storm, Black Widow, Captain Marvel, Invisible Woman, Jessica Jones, Batgirl, Batwoman, and my favorite, Catwoman, who is really more of an anti-heroine, but whatever. Also, why do we never hear about female Disney princesses? Why are they never celebrated as examples of strong women? Why do women have to be more masculine to be considered strong? Feminists wanted women to be strong by saying that women should act more like men. Anyway, as the episode continues, the Powerpuff Girls start being horrible to all of the male characters in the show, including the boys at school, their professor, and the mayor of their town. Meanwhile, Femme Fatale is busy robbing mild-mannered men. So this is the patriarchy she is fighting, I'm guessing. A cold, bold female robbing working men. Later, Miss Velma and the school teacher talk to the Powerpuff Girls. It's an interesting scene, and we see how other women in the town are being negatively affected by Femme Fatale. This actually takes the episode in an interesting direction. Or so I thought. Shortly after, we're back to Misandry. The Powerpuff Girls confront Femme Fatale again and start talking about Susan B. Anthony. They say, once upon a time, women weren't allowed to do much of anything. That obviously isn't true, which people who are against feminism know. Susan B. Anthony broke the law by voting in 1972. The police wanted to go easy on her because she was a girl. They didn't want to send her to jail, but she wanted to go to jail because she wanted to be treated equally. Are you telling me that the police officers didn't want to send a woman to jail? That they actually would have let her off? And somehow this is a sign that she was being oppressed? If feminists wanted to be treated equally, they would lobby for women to be drafted into the military. They also wouldn't keep telling everyone that only women couldn't vote. They would say that both men and women couldn't vote throughout most of human society, and we should get equal voting rights. A lot of men couldn't vote in 1872. Voting rights were given on the basis of class and property ownership. Check out my video on the history of first-wave feminism, which discusses the right to vote and why this was a class victory, not a feminist victory. Susan B. Anthony was also a racist, and she is famous for stating that she would cut off her own arm before giving the right to the Negro over the woman. It's true that this was a commonplace attitude back then, and she was involved in the abolitionist movement as well. A lot of Quakers, and she was a Quaker, were heavily involved in abolition of slavery, which is a good thing. But regardless, Susan B. Anthony was not interested in lobbying for voting rights for people of color. Plus, she and Elizabeth Cady Stanton pretty much viewed women as slaves. They argued that women's position was comparable to that of being a slave, which most feminists have historically argued. That is disgusting. How can you compare the state of a well-to-do woman who has a husband and a home and generally is socially respected to the status of a slave? This is just more misandrist propaganda and pushes a narrative to children, which has doubtlessly brainwashed my generation into seeing feminism as a noble movement instead of a deeply malicious one. The final show I will discuss is an old favorite of mine, The Fairly OddParents. It's about Timmy Turner, a boy who has secretly got two fairy godparents, Cosmo and Wanda. I remember noticing how Cosmo was stupid and Wanda was smart, which again plays into the trope of men are stupid and women are smart. This is prevalent in other shows like Family Guy, The Simpsons, and Daria. The episode, The Boy Who Would Be Queen, is quite culturally relevant. Timmy wants to get invited to Trixie Tang's birthday party. She is the popular girl at school that he has a crush on. Timmy is only invited because he says he will give Trixie a present. He wants to figure out what gift to buy her and doesn't know what girls like. He and Cosmo start laughing about this, and Wanda gets angry and turns Timmy into a girl. As a girl, Timmy befriends Trixie and discovers she actually enjoys boy stuff like comic books. At one point, Timmy's friends freak out when they discover two girls playing boys' games, as in Timmy is a girl and Trixie, and say that this is just going to mess things up when you have boys doing girl stuff and girls doing boy stuff. This speaks to a lot of where we are now with the rise of wokeism and gender confusion among my generation. Timmy ultimately wishes to be a boy again and goes to Trixie's party offering to be her friend. She can't publicly admit to liking boy things at her party, so she throws him out. Timmy is happy because Trixie remembered his name, and he feels like by being more sensitive and treating Trixie like a person, he won her approval. Except he didn't, because she threw him out of the party. I never liked Trixie as a child. She is vapid and shallow, and she reminds me of the girls I went to school with. The worst character in that show for me was always Vicky, Timmy's babysitter, who isn't actually in this episode. The moral of this episode is that men should be more sensitive and feminine to get with women. As I talked about in a previous video, women generally are not drawn to men who are sensitive and feminine. Women usually want men who are confident, assertive, and masculine. This is why girls like Trixie don't go for guys like Timmy. They go for the popular boys who are more traditionally masculine, not geeky outsiders. Women admire masculine men, not effeminate men. I'm not saying that men and women can't enjoy activities largely enjoyed by the opposite sex. I'm simply saying that most heterosexual relationships work when a man is masculine and a woman is feminine. This is obviously a generalization, and I'm aware there are some feminine men and there are some masculine women, and that's fine. I'm talking about what works overall. Men who are really stupid and very just sensitive and just agreeable towards women and don't show much backbone are not really what most women fantasize about. And most men don't want their wives to emasculate them. Ultimately, these cartoons are pushing an agenda that one doesn't really notice until years later. This has led to the rise of gender confusion and misandry prevalent among my generation today. I still have a lot of nostalgia for these old shows. I do want to mention briefly Totally Spies, a show that I still enjoy as an adult. I would say that this show does a good job of being pro-female, but not necessarily pro-feminist. The Spies are girly girls who like fashion, boys, and shopping, yet they're also tough and they can fight. Out of curiosity, I watched one episode called Women of Wrestling, spelled WOW, that shows a woman create a cult called the Sisterhood to try and take over the world. Very Amazonian. This episode didn't come off to me as feminist because it seems to be critiquing the concept of a female takeover. The girls themselves, Clover, Sam, and Alex, are not really positioned as necessarily feminist. They're smart, but they're not anti-men. And the ending is also interesting because the show does a good job at displaying bad female behavior as well as positive female behavior from the Spies. Are there any children's cartoons that you have seen that contained explicitly misandrist elements? Do let me know your thoughts on this below. For regular essays critiquing feminism, follow my Rational Female Substack. Link is available here or in the description below. To support the channel further, consider buying me a coffee via this link. Your support really helps me out a lot.